You can all join palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good morning everybody. Nice to see you all here. Anyone here for the first time? Welcome. What brings you here?
I've been coming to other meetings at Temple and I thought I'd try one.
Yeah, so far so good, huh?
Yeah.
Right on. Good, well, welcome. What else? Anyone first time? Yeah,
It's
welcome.
the first time I've been here, but I went to the introductory lecture when you were in the old building downtown
Wow.
20 years ago.
Yeah, that was, well, we started there 17 years ago. Yeah.
Okay.
You know the funny thing? I'm saying the same thing I was 17 years ago. So you haven't missed anything. You know? You can just put it on repeat. Yeah. And I'm really just talking to myself anyways, and people keep showing up, so I'll just keep saying it. But what was your name?
My name,
Yeah.
Kathleen.
Kathleen, welcome back. Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
to see you. Anyone else first time here? Those of you who come back, why show up? Why come back?
Growth.
Growth, yeah. What else?
Grounding. being
Grounding.
present.
Presence, yeah.
Insight from other people.
Insight, yeah. What else? If you're coming in late, there's seats. Not late, but if you're coming in now, there's seats.
Community.
Community, yeah.
Still suffering.
Still suffering, right? That kind of sums it up. You mean in 2 months the suffering's not gone, huh? Man, see, I told you I'm clearly doing something wrong. I haven't taken away anybody's suffering. You know, it's an important point. I talk about this a lot, but the Buddha was very clear that nobody can take away your suffering. Nobody. The beauty of this teaching is there's only one person that can take away your suffering. And the person that can take away your suffering is the same person that caused your suffering. That's the good news. Initially it's hard. We have to realize, like, man, I caused my own suffering. But if it were other people who caused your suffering, that would be terrible. Because then you'd have to rely on other people to take away your suffering. So the beauty of embracing that we are the ones that are causing all 100% of our suffering. The beauty of that is that means we have the absolute power, control, ability, whatever word you want to use, to take away that suffering. So that in and of itself, I think, is very liberating. I think it's very promising and beautiful to know that, wow, this is all me. Nobody caused any of the suffering in my mind and in my heart other than myself. And that gives me the absolute motivation, inspiration, drive, diligent effort to take it away. Where people often get lost is they, you know, if you're newer to this or been at it a long time, still sometimes I think it's possible to default into thinking that other things or people or places are the reason we suffer. And I'm not saying that other things around us don't happen that make it incredibly difficult or challenging for us. It does. They do. Absolutely. But they always will. So the sooner we embrace the fact that this is our journey and not anybody else's, the sooner we realize we can suffer less. And for me, as I often share, I think this practice is not about this goal or some ideal that all of a sudden I'm just going to wake up and no longer suffer. I mean, if you are born, you are going to suffer. Discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction, things that happen that you just don't like. Heavy loss, death, little things like your coffee made the wrong way, whatever it might be. Right? It's going to happen every day. And can it happen less? And that's to me what this practice is about. So we just stay at it. To those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Feel free to chime in if you have any questions or thoughts. I will start with a meditation practice. For those of you who are maybe joining for the first time, a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. All right, posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten slightly. Shoulders are relaxed. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated or laying down, just try to relax the shoulders, hands around the knees or lap, whatever is comfortable. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important from this practice, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds. And the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize how you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment. It's nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada. Means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reaction. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, and still. All we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. This is direct perception into the present moment. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation doesn't fix that. It helps you become aware of your life that's a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, so you can then make changes. Meditation, Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody you encounter. And that's all. We spend so much time trying to fix, control, manipulate everything else and everyone else to get what we want. This is craving, this is desire, this causes suffering. So much time trying to control situations and people and places to get what we want. This is craving, this causes suffering. So much time not okay with the way things are, so we try to build it differently. This is craving. This causes suffering. Become aware of this. Now yes, there are healthy cravings and healthy desires. But most of the craving and desire that people in this room have are not healthy. They cause suffering. Become aware of that. Look at that. This practice is a mirror. It allows you to look at your own greed, your own anger, your own ignorance, your own cravings, your own desires, and how much time you spend trying to fix everything else and change everything else and get everything to be exactly how you want it to be. Just set that down, sit down and breathe. All the stories in your head about how you think things should go and what they should be like, drop them for a minute and see what that's like. Come into the present moment of just sitting and breathing. That's the beauty of this practice. Being with the present moment. And too many people, they don't like the present moment. And yes, I understand there are present moments that definitely need to be changed and fixed. But because we spent years building up in our heads, the way we want a situation to be, it doesn't even seem possible that it could go differently from that for us to be happy and safe. So we feed that story, that box that we've created, completely lost in our delusions. Just stop telling the story. So with that, I'll pause. For me, I really just prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. We'll use the rest of our brief time for that. And for those who are joining virtually, welcome. If you have any questions, there's a chat box on your screen. Feel free to say hello. Put any questions there and I'll do my best to respond. So we'll use the rest of our time, open up to questions.
I'm experiencing a divorce right now, and there is, well, the saying goes, there's a thin line between love and anger, or something like that. My intention is to meet all parts of the process with love and kindness, which I think is causing me to sacrifice some boundaries. I guess that's really hard. Because emails can hurt, especially when they arrive kind of unannounced. And I'm kind of struggling because the divorce is effectively my fault. So I have a certain amount of guilt or shame in asking for what I need, and maybe causing myself some suffering by staying in the loving kindness side. And I was just curious to know what your thoughts, and I guess that can occur with parents or siblings or good friends. Like, it's not unique to a divorce, but I don't know. I don't know what to do, for lack of a better word. Not that I should do something, but like.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that. You know, your situation sucks.
That made me feel better.
Yeah. The truth hurts.
Yeah.
You know? And I'll respond to this the same way. The good thing for me is I try to be as general and vague with everyone as possible. So my response to you isn't even specific to your situation, because then people might look at me as if I'm supposed to give them answers. And then when shit doesn't work out, they're like, well, you told me to do this, you know? Yeah. So that's how I keep, you know, my boundaries safe. But as a practitioner, what I've learned from this practice is, one, I commend you for owning what you did, whatever it is. I don't want details, you know. I already have more details than I needed, although I appreciate you sharing it. You know, it's really hard to own what we did, and that's the first step. Mm-hmm. You know, the expression, the truth hurts. That's kind of where we're at. And you know, it's funny because in your sharing comment, wasn't even really a question. You actually said literally everything I would have said. You just put it in different kind of views, not even words, different perceptions. And what I mean by that is emails will always come across unannounced, unexpected. That's the whole point of an email. They come in when they come in. When you're going through a heavy situation in life, it's always going to hurt. When you have things that you desire and crave, it's going to be really difficult. We're also very quick, I think, to, and again, this isn't specific, but to create boundaries to keep ourselves safe, which in most cases is, I think, valid. You know, often I'll say things around, you know, people in abusive relationships, toxic relationships, you know, domestic violence, things like that. And you've probably heard me share, for those who haven't heard, you know, Buddhist practice doesn't mean you become a doormat and you just sit there and let people punch you just because you're Buddhist. No, you remove yourself from that situation immediately. And so if your craving and desire is to stop being punched, then move on, leave, and you'll stop being punched. And that's a metaphor, but also could be very literal. You know, having worked with people who've been abused for over 25 years, it happens. There is no simple solution other than to just face it as you are. The honest reality that you screwed up, this is going to hurt. And in time, it will be behind you. And in the comment about boundaries, all I can suggest is ask yourself, with these boundaries, not to respond right now, just to ask yourself, not like just this immediate reaction, are these boundaries that you're setting up really necessary, or are they things that you feel you deserve based on whatever reasons? And if you actually set some of these boundaries down that maybe aren't related to safety, but just related to desires and cravings of things you want, maybe you could be free from a lot of the suffering you're carrying. I'm a big fan of boundaries if they're set up for the right reasons. And again, I'm not saying yours aren't. That's why I'm asking you to observe them and see. All conditioned phenomena comes together for a period of time and then ceases to exist. And so much of our suffering will occur because we will question ourselves and wish we hadn't said or done things that we did or said. Cannot change that. The answer is always loving kindness. with safety. Always. And that is not easy. But that's the practice. And the more you extend loving kindness to the situation, including yourself, when we screw up, we often want to create loving kindness towards others as we're feeling like the backlash of what we did. But I suggest also starting with sending loving kindness to yourself. Like, you screwed up. Can't change it. But you got your whole life ahead of you. And no need to destroy yourself for any mistake that you may or may not have made. Yeah, just keep going. Not fun, not easy, but we just keep going. What else? Questions?
Yeah. My marriage is in peril. And if I lose this woman, it'll be the greatest loss of my life. And I've lost everything, including my kids. I need a lifetime of change. I need her to look back at the next 10 years and say, that was the greatest decision of my life, to stay with this man. I believe I'm in the place for personal change. Am I right? And where do I start?
Well, when was the last time you picked up a drink?
A while.
How long?
A few years.
Okay.
But
No, hang on. Now I get to talk. I've heard every question from you, every story, and it's all about your wife, you wanting your wife to be a certain way. That's a pretty shitty approach. Any sort of desire, craving we have towards others viewing us anyway, it's not about them. It's about us. We cannot expect other people to view us certain ways. Well, you can, but you're setting yourself up for major pain and suffering. We are human. We will do what we will do, and they will do what they will do. People will choose to love you or hate you. People will choose to like you or not like you. People will choose to agree with you or disagree with you. The suffering comes from your desire to want people to view you a certain way. You just said you want her 10 years from now to look back at you a certain way. Then change how you are. And you're working on it because you're here. But all of your questions geared towards you wanting her to be a certain way, you have that ability to change yourself. You keep showing up. Your diligence is there. Keep showing up, keep working on you. But to set this goal that she's going to view you a certain way if you do something is very controlling and toxic. She's going to do what she's going to do. Her life is her life. Learn to be a kind person because it's nice to be a kind person. And when I was younger and treated people like shit, of course they were pissed off because I treated people like shit. I didn't want them to like me because I treated them like shit. I needed to stop treating people that way. And then they'll choose what they'll choose. But the most direct response I can give you is every single day, work on staying clean, sober, and being kind. But not with some goal that means she's going to love you. Because then what happens if she doesn't? Then you'll be destroyed. Be a kind, decent human being because it's nice to be a kind, decent human being. And let the chips fall as they may. We all have our stories that we hold on to them. You can control your actions, that is all. What else? Yeah.
Scott,
Hi, Scott.
not
Jeff.
married. Nice to meet you. Not married. So through life, we build up this identity about ourselves. And as time goes on, that identity hits reality. And then we realize that perhaps what we project to the world and project back in ourselves is really a facade, or at least parts of it are, and that causes a lot of pain, suffering, anxiety, depression, and so on. How do we go about discovering who we are? Yes.
Yeah.
The authentic self.
Yeah. No, great. So, what I love about what you said is that you talked about this identity that we've created, and then that identity meets reality, and you realize that that identity isn't reality. And then you're jumping to how do we create our authentic true self, as if that idea of an authentic true self is going to be any different than the facade of the identity you just created. It's all the same facade. If we drop this idea of having to create ourselves to be anything whatsoever, I say this all the time, Buddhist practice is not therapy. Buddhist practice is a practice. And what occurs from that is what occurs from that. So, there is, the answer always around how do we figure out our true self from a Buddhist lens is really simple. There is no true self. So that's an easy one. Right? Problem solved. You will never find according to Buddhist teachings, you will never find yourself. You, Scott, are a series of causes and conditions. The law of cause and effect. This is what the Buddha referred to as karma, action. Karma is not what we get. Karma is not what goes around comes around. Karma is not, well, they did bad stuff, it's going to happen to them. Karma is action. Karma is what we bring into the world. This is our focus. So, instead of trying to figure out how do you become, it's great that you realize that the identity that you've created your whole life, and you're looking at that and you're like, wow, that's just some facade. So you're there. But I suggest abandoning this idea that you're eventually going to create this identity that is going to be different from the facade that you've already created. Focus on your actions, your karma. Think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. All three of these comments and questions are exactly the practice is the same. Too many people come to Buddhist practice wanting their problems. It helps as it occurs. Practice of Buddhism comes from a place of loving kindness. Ultimately, right? They would all say different things about you, right? Are any of them right? Are any of them wrong? It's just their what? Perception. Thich Nhat Hanh, the great late Zen Buddhist master, Nirvana, which is freedom from suffering, is freedom from views. What this means, in my unenlightened, ignorant attempt to understand it, is that my views will always be there. They will change, they will shift, they will, evolve, they will whatever. But they're still my views. But they're not correct. They're just my views. And I apply that absolutely 100% to the view of my sense of self. You would describe yourself a certain way, and 10 other people would describe you 10 other ways. You and them are not right or wrong, it's just your perceptions. All we are is a collection of our karma, meaning our actions. So it's not about who we are. I like to think of it very simply as karma to me and this identity of defining our true authentic self. Just fucking be honest with your words and actions. Why do you have to identify that and label that? Just be honest with yourself. Be true. But in that practice of being honest and true, be kind. Be sincere. Right? Look at the intention. Think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds, cause no harm. And then when you die, people will be like, oh, this is what Scott did. They'll all talk about who you were, you know, but who you are, I mean, our culture has just ruined this whole thing, in my opinion. So we're trying to unravel this conditioning that we've been stuck with. You're not alone. You know, we're all screwed from birth. Everybody gives us a name and tells us who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to be and where we're supposed to go, what we're supposed to wear and what we're supposed to eat. We're screwed. So you're all right. What else? There's a whole bunch of stuff here. Hang on one second. Find myself getting angry whenever I think that I'm the one who most often reaches out. Yeah, so there's a question here. Again, similar theme around, I find myself getting angry whenever I think that I'm the one who most often reaches out to people to connect and check on them, and that the dynamic is imbalanced. Expectation. My suggestion as a form of practice is if you love and care people and you reach out to them, this is the Buddhist teachings on dana, generosity. Give your time, attention, love to help them, to reach out to them, to care for them without any expectation of anything in return. When you don't expect anything in return, you're not worried about balance. You give just to give. You listen just to listen. You reach out just to reach out. If they don't give back, that's not you, that's them. You don't need to own that. That's their mess or their beauty, but it's not yours. Then you go on to say, I know that I shouldn't, or try to think that I shouldn't expect people to act how I'd like them to, but it's still painful and I suffer. It's painful because you want them to be a certain way, right? My master always said, learn to expect nothing from anyone ever and just focus on your actions. And that, to me, was the most beautiful teaching. And then you don't suffer. You don't expect anything from anyone ever. You'll never be let down. Okay, so yeah, so same thing. All right, any other, okay. Other questions? Yeah.
What does kindness to self look like in practice?
So the question was, what does kindness to self look like in practice? I mean, that's a hard, they're all hard ones, but that's a hard one to kind of tell somebody else in a way, because only you would know ultimately what the answer to that is. But I think that I'll start with, because for me this was a big point of practice from growing up really angry. All of that anger came from anger towards myself. So I had to learn to be kind towards myself, and once I learned to be kind towards myself, then I could be very genuine and real in kindness towards others, right? I could be kind towards others and it wasn't real, which was still better than not being kind towards others, right? That kind of fake it till you make it thing. But once kindness happened to myself, then it was like, wow, this is really nice to be kind to myself and kind to others. And I think for me, which is to me really the best way to respond to this is, since your question is what does it look like in practice, it started with the things I told myself about myself. It's interesting that I find many people talk to themselves harsher than anyone would ever speak to them. And we fill our heads with so many harsh words and views and judgments, very often worse than we even look at towards others. And so if someone was screaming at you and yelling at you and calling you names and saying a bunch of terrible things about you all day long, wouldn't it be hard to be kind to people? Now, think about what we do to ourselves. We are constantly critiquing, attacking, angry, telling ourselves, I'm not this enough, I'm not that enough. There's so much judgment on Again, karma, right? Thoughts, words, and actions. What we think, what we say, and what we do. So for me, I always express it as, just for me as a practitioner, very often it's thoughts, and then words, and then actions. Not always in that order, but most likely for me. So what I think, learn to stop thinking differently about yourself. And to stop thinking, I wish you all could see her expressions right now. It's not important, but it's just kind of funny, in a fun way. If you can change, or one of the ways to change how you think about yourself is to do things that will trigger, will cause, will hopefully help change the way you think about yourself. Because for me, if I kept doing a bunch of stupid, harmful things, I wasn't going to change how I thought about myself. Right? And I was talking about 20 years ago when I showed up at the temple, they just gave me shit to do. Go help here, go there, go to prison, do that. And I just started doing it. And all of a sudden, I was doing good things. And when I started doing good things, then I started to think, wow, maybe I'm not a terrible person. And the truth is, I wasn't a terrible person. I just thought that way about myself. So I started to do good things, which started to change the way I viewed myself. And then when I changed the way my perception, my lens of myself, then I changed the things I said to me about myself. Even with the mistakes. Right? Because those are going to happen. Right? And part of that process is when you continue to do things that you shouldn't do, you realize it's just life. You're doing your best. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to say and do things you shouldn't do. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it good. It's not like, well, sorry, I'm just working on my stuff. No, I mean, we own that and it sucks. But we don't want to be so hard on ourselves because then we default back into our view of ourselves. So for me, kindness towards self in practice starts with what we think and say about ourselves. And that I do believe comes from helping others. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So Buddhism is fairly decentralized religion. Yes. And it's not Catholicism.
It's definitely not Catholicism. Yeah.
So that's a doctrine.
Well, okay, go ahead, continue.
So what is the Buddhist opinions regarding changing the body, whether it be piercings, tattoos, hair color, cosmetic surgery, and so forth?
Well, that's a fun, light question from everything else today. I appreciate it, yeah. So let me just kind of sum this up. A little historical stuff from my view, and I'm not a scholar, I don't like to read or study much, but I've been around it long enough to give a general idea. To your question about, Buddhism being decentralized and things like that, there was one historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. He lived 2,500 years ago, 500 years before Christ. He was a prince. He left home. He rode the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years. And at 35, he sat down and said, I understand why we suffer. This is the Four Noble Truths. Suffering, the cause, greed, anger, ignorance, the ending of it, liberation, and the path. Eightfold Path. Use, thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. That whole teaching is on Google for free. And that is the heart of Buddhist teachings. That doesn't change. Right? Maybe. And it's also important to understand that it was an oral transmission of the teaching. So they memorized everything. And then 50 to 100 years later, they debated how long it took. They came together and basically said, this is some good stuff, we should write it down. So they began to transcribe it on palm leaves. 100, 200 years later, after he dies, it goes south out of India, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia. Around the turn of the century, 500 years later, goes China, Japan, Korea, Northern Asia. 1,000 years after he died, it goes into Tibet. And then maybe 100 years ago, give or take, it starts working its way into the US, Canada, Europe, Western countries. There are different lineages of Buddhism. There are different sects of Buddhism. There are different cultures that have influenced Buddhism. But the teaching of the Buddha has never changed. That's why I wanted to address first. So it's not as if, Suzuki Roshi, great Zen teacher who built San Francisco Zen Center, would say that as Buddhism enters a new culture, a new country, it meshes with that culture and country. But it doesn't change Buddhism. We change how we adapt it. right? And I know I haven't even touched your question yet, but I just, based on the way you said that, I want you to understand that part for everybody, really. Very often, and leave it to Americans to do this, very often people will want to change Buddhism and make it more American. The last thing we need Buddhism to become is more American. Buddhism is, and no offense to America, Buddhism is just fine. But in a country that is built the way this country was built, we need to be very careful about changing Buddhism. So, to your question about the body, piercings, tattoos, things like that, that's up to you. Right? What I would look at in that question very directly is, what is the intention behind it? Everything with Buddhist practice and teachings is, what's your intention? And is it coming from pride? Is it coming from ego? Is it coming from, I'm going to get a tattoo to piss off my parents? Or is it because, like, wow, I really want the tattoo of the Cubs World Series on my arm? Like, what is the reason behind it? The piercings, all that kind of stuff. What's the intention? No different than the clothes we wear, the haircuts we have, the shoes that are on our feet. What is the intention behind it? Is it greed, anger, and ignorance? Or is it loving kindness, right? Compassion and wisdom? That, to me, is where the focus should be. I look at the Buddha's life as a model, not suggesting anybody of us, this isn't a suggestion for us to do this, but he was a prince. So he had all the wealth, all the riches, everything you can imagine, and he had princely long hair, which is very symbolic apparently at the time, to have the beautiful long hair. So as a symbolic gesture of renouncing his attachment to worldly possessions, he cut off his long hair and shaved his head, right? So the shaving of the head was a way to say, I'm renouncing my attachment to the way I was and these worldly possessions. So it was a symbolic gesture more than anything. And that tradition still carries today in many Buddhist cultures and traditions. But there's no, I think you said dogma. There's no dogma, to my knowledge, that says, do not pierce your nose. Do not get a tattoo. Ask yourself why. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. We'll do one more question before we close. Go for it.
I was curious if you could talk us through the statues behind you, what they mean, and I'm kind of curious, given my understanding of Buddhism, like gold is a very aristocratic kind of color, so if you could touch on that as well.
So I'll close with this thought. The question was around the statues, symbolism, and the gold. So I'll start with the gold, which is really easy. When we initially got these statues made, coming up on 5-year anniversary of having them made, and Maggie and I really wanted to complete the shrine in a very proper, traditional way. And so it's a long, beautiful process having these made, brought in, etc., the blessing and everything. But when we first were choosing them, right? And they had sent us from Taiwan 3D print models, little ones. And some of the samples were gold. And my first reaction as an American kid, we're not putting massive gold statues in the front of this shrine, right? I knew the aversion people would have to it, right? Same aversion I had. When you look at Buddhist sutras, they talk about the golden ray. In Asian culture, you predominantly see massive gold statues to represent bodhicitta, Buddha nature, the awakened presence, which is a metaphor for the sun. In our culture, very different. Night that I did the class, I'll never forget. It's all recorded, you can see it on the website somewhere, and she goes, spoken into now, but photography in Buddhism is beautiful. Statues and things like that, but that's Western baggage or just baggage. This is Manjushri, represents wisdom, right? Sits on a lion. You ever been in a cage with an untamed, crazy lion? What would it be like?
I wouldn't be here.
You wouldn't be here. It's killing you. System. As the playful little cat, right? So he turned the crazy lion. This is the Tibetan version, but that Tonka over there, it's the first time I've heard that. That would be great too. But it's a sword. The sword, this is same Manjushri, just different cultures depicted, right? This is more of a Taiwanese or Japanese style, and that's more of a Tibetan style. The sword on our head. So that's of great diligence. But if your hair was on fire, would you sit there and let it burn? No. You'd be working damn hard. That effort, and it's represented by the 6 tusks on the elephant. That middle here is Kuan Yin. Her name literally means hearer of the world's cries. She hears all the suffering in the world and pours out compassion to heal. The Dalai Lama, whose name means ocean of wisdom, they say he's the literal rebirth of the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. And when we thought about what we wanted to put as our main shrine piece, right, we had our little mace, the female energy and presence of Kuan Yin. And we felt that compassion is what this temple, and it's considered the base of compassion. And I thought it was really cool when we put it in, because my first kind of feeling was that the vase of compassion was pouring down on the emaciated Buddha when he was starving to death, which was then flowing down onto me through diligent effort. So that's the short story. I'm going to close in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. All right, a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thanks for being practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, teachings, and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Every night we have different practices going on, led by different people. Every Thursday, 4:30, we do a food redistribution program. So anytime you're really struggling and you think your life sucks, show up at 4:30, and then we go downtown and feed people, sleep on a sidewalk every night. So if you lack gratitude and you don't think your life's going okay, feed people, sleep on a sidewalk, and it tends to put things into perspective. Next Saturday we'll have a special guest, actually Bhante Piananda, who Sri Lankan monk, master, who we've been friends with for years. He did the initial blessing on the statues. He's going to be here next Saturday at 11 o'clock. He's been here a few times. He's wonderful. So if you're, it'll be same bat time, same bat channel, but you'll have a Sri Lankan monk here next Saturday at 11. Really special to have him. So he's kind of like the Dalai Lama, but in Sri Lanka. So otherwise, Buddha for You is downstairs if you need anything. If you want to help in the garden, there's probably stuff to do. We don't have a cleaning crew, we are it. So if you want to help take care of the temple, you can do that as well. So thank you all for being here.